Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Kodolakis. Welcome to our Real Life Stories from the Managed Database Administration Team webinar. So let's start by quickly introducing you to your speakers for today. I'm joined by Roy Ellis and Rob Farver. Roy has been with OpenEdge for 30 years, starting in tech support, moving to development, then to product management, and finally for the last 4 years as the director of the Managed Database Service team. Roy has been involved in nearly every product in OpenEdge, most recently helping to deliver PAS-OE, replacing the classic app server and web speed. Joining us for Q&A is Rob Farver. Rob has been a Progress OpenEdge DBA since 2008. He joined the Progress MDBA team in 2017, bringing years of hands-on experience to the role. Since then, he has advanced to become the manager of the North America DBA team, where he leads with deep technical knowledge and a strong commitment to customer success. I'm really excited to have both Roy and Rob with us today, and now we'll turn it over to Roy to start the discussion.
All right. Well, thank you, Susan, for that introduction. Today, we're going to talk about real stories from the MDBA team. My name is Roy Ellis. I've been with Progress for over 30 years now, started out in tech support, spent many years in development working on things like PAS-OE and the OpenEdge Authentication Gateway, spent a few years in product management, and for the last 4 years, I've been running the Managed Database Services. So today, we're going to just talk about some stories and talk about some things that I've seen, and hopefully they'll be interesting to you. And we'll talk a little bit about the MDBA team so you understand that this is the team that is handling these things. So let's get started. Today I've broken it down into 3 groups of stories. Performance stories that we've worked on with customers, PAS-OE, which is always a interesting discussion, and finally some migration stories that we've had, just to break things down by areas. So let's jump right in. We'll talk about some real performance stories we've had and some issues we've worked on. I've broken this down into 3 different things: a hidden problem, a query performance, and internet slowness. This is mostly so I know what I'm talking about, but it's also nice to have cute little titles as we move along. So the first one, the hidden problem. We call it that, and you'll figure out as we go along. But we had a customer come to us. They're on 11.7 on Linux, about a 1.7 terabyte database at the time, and they've been having poor performance for months, right? And they've always been told, hey, what you need to do to increase your performance is increase the buffer pool, right? Put more of that database into memory, so you're not asking for it from disk all the time. So they did that, right? And it didn't make a difference, right? They kept doing that. It didn't make a difference. So what they finally said was, let's see if we can talk to someone else and see if they can figure out the problem. So they hired the MDBA team. We installed our product called ProMonitor, which monitors the database and various other things and gives us metrics on the system, right? We let that run for a little while so we could get some idea how things are running. And sure enough, the database buffer pool is too small, so we increased it. And guess what? It didn't change anything, just like they said. So not a big surprise, but sometimes just testing something, it gets fixed. So what we did was we said, all right, let's take a look at why this might be a problem. We shared the problem with the whole MDBA team. We have 20 people on the team. They looked at the problem. We reviewed settings. There were some suggestions made. And then finally, someone found what was the smoking gun at this case, right? They had set -hash years and years ago. That's the hash table algorithm that helps you find things in the buffer pool, right? So it helps you find things faster in the buffer pool. And they had set it for when they had a very small buffer pool, and they had just left it in there in their PF file, right? So what we did was we removed that hash file, right? We increased the buffer pool, and we let the buffer pool decide what the hash table is, and boom, performance got better. So it was one of those things that, one person may not have found the issue. It took a lot of people looking at it, and it took the MDBA team as a whole reviewing it and understanding how it worked. And it was something that no one else had found before then. So it was a nice little win, and they were very, very happy to get the performance they were looking for after that. So, they signed up for the MDBA team at that point and for the service. What that gives them is regular performance tuning. They have a DBA that works with them all the time. We've helped them add another division to their database, so a lot more people in the database, a lot bigger database that they have to support, and we helped them with all that tuning as it went on. They also had index corruption, which we debugged and figured out what was going on in the code. We gave them a workaround and we logged a bug, so they shouldn't see that problem anymore. And we help them implement CDC, even though they're using ProtoSQL right now. We help them implement the CDC so that they can use that for other ways to get data out of the database for their business recording. So, what started out as a one-off situation ended up being a DBA customer that we've worked with very well, great customer, and I think it's a good relationship for both of us. So just a real quick picture from our dashboard, which I'll talk to about more here in a few minutes. As you can see, the database buffer pool is set to 100 gig, and during the busy part of the day, the numbers are nice and flat. We're not reading the disks very often, okay? And that's very important. The more you read the disks, the more you wait, right? The more you have in memory, the less you wait. There's a high spot here when they're running some big reports at night, but other than that, we have some good numbers here from this customer. Okay, so I've talked about the MDBA service for a minute, a couple of times, and showing you a graph. Give me a couple minutes to just go through the service real quick so you can understand what we do, and then we'll get back to the stories. The managed database administration, which we're going to use MDBA because it's much smaller. We're going to use that from now on. It's a team of 20 DBAs around the world to support your application. I don't say database anymore because it's not just a database as part of your application anymore. We do have 24/7 monitoring alerting so we can make sure you're up and running and we get all that data that helps to tune your database. We are reactive. If something goes bad, we will jump in and help you fix it, but we're also proactive. What are those things that we can do to keep there from being an issue down the road, right? We'll talk more about that. Also, I've already talked about the dashboard, but all of our data that we gather now is available for a dashboard that you can see and you can look at. Fully transparent. What are we looking at? Do you have any questions? We'll help you with that. And as I've already said, we don't say databases anymore. We say application because we don't just do databases. So first, let's talk about the team. We've built a team of 20 DBAs, 21 including me, with over 20 years experience, all of them. Some of them have 30 years experience, an awful lot of them. This is the team that is awake around the clock, so you're not waking someone up if there's an issue. They're watching your data. They're looking for emails to say something is bad, and they're stepping in to help you, right? You don't have somebody first line, or you don't have somebody on a beeper to wake them up. These people are at the desk waiting to help you. And again, there's no first line. These are the people with all that experience that will be handling your issue. This slide is very simply to say, hey, this is not a fly-by-night operation, right? We've been around for 15 years now. We have over 175 customers. Many of those customers have multiple sites, so we're handling over 1,000 sites at any given time. We're handling over 3,300 databases, 380 terabytes of total database size we're monitoring. And at any given time, we have a total connected users of you can see the number there. The point is, we monitor a lot of databases. We handle a lot of connected users. We have a lot of sites. All the tools we have in place make that possible, and we're going to be around for a long time. All right, so I've talked about the monitoring a couple of times. Let's talk about our monitoring tool. Our monitoring tool is written in something called 4GL, right? It's just the same thing your application is written in. What we do is we use that 4GL client and we read things in the VST tables and we get data out of the app servers, web speed, and PAS-OE. The first thing we do, though, is we have two parts, right? We have the reactive part and we have the proactive part. This is the reactive part. We'll go every minute, every 5 minutes, and we'll check to make sure, hey, is my database running? Is my app server running? Web speed, PAS-OE. Do I have a long-running transaction that could cause the BI to grow? Is my BI growing? Am I running out of space? All of those things that either could be a problem or could lead to a problem in the near future, we check those. And if there's anything out of bounds, we send an email, right? And we can send the email to you, we can send it to us, we can send it to both of us. And depending on how we've worked it out, because this isn't cookie cutter, how do you want to handle things, is how we'll attack that problem. So that's the reactive part. This is the proactive part. Every 15 minutes by default, we gather all the information from your database, all those metrics from the app server, web speed, PAS-OE, CPU, disk size, disk space, Pro2, OE replication, and we gather all that information and we send that 15-minute poll over to our database that's behind our firewall in our database. And that way we can use that for dashboards and for reporting and for planning, right? So, and we keep that for 2 years. So we have an idea, how fast is something growing? How much are you using up on resources? So we know that in the future. Service agreements, if you have and it says database down situation, if you have anything critical that could cause your application go down or your database is down now, we will respond within an hour and we'll help you get you up and running. That is our job, to get you back up and running. If you have just questions or you want technical support or you want to talk to your DBA, send the DBA an email, but you can also send another email to a more generic group, and we'll make sure we get back to you within 2 hours on a business day. If you ask us on the weekend, it'll get queued there for the next business day. Again, the same DBA who's watching for those critical alerts will also be watching this email. All right, let's talk about the proactive in more detail. The minimum amount you'll get for proactive is your primary DBA who owns your system and you'll be working with daily. We'll put together a monthly report for you. Now, this report can be sent to you. You can read it. No meeting necessary, but if you want a meeting and if you want to talk about it and you want to plan, those meetings are part of your service, and we can make sure that you get these things done, right? The monthly reports includes preventive recommendations. It also actions. What are we going to do for you this month? Index compactions, whatever, what needs to be done. And we also review the alerts, because knowing what kind of alerts are coming up, and we don't just have critical alerts, we have warnings that say, hey, this is starting to become a problem. Should we start looking at this as it could be a future problem, so on. So this is some of the things you'll see in the report. Here's some more detailed stuff. We're looking at everything on the system. We're looking at everything in the database. We're seeing over here when we think an area will be 100% full. These are all the different alerts where they were critical and what kind of situation they were in. So a lot of data is sent every month. A lot of data is reviewed by your DBA, usually a couple of times a week, but definitely at the end of the month to be reviewed for your report. So again, the point here is, if we do our job right, you won't have downtimes that we can prevent. Just a quick look at the dashboard. This came out about 3 years ago. It gives you the same access to the same data we're looking at. We still have an internal database that gives us everything in tabular form, but we use this also. This is very graphical, and it's very, green is good, red is bad, yellow and orange are, getting there. So this is what you have access. Anybody into your business, once you become part of the DBA team, will have access to this dashboard. And this dashboard looks a little different now because we're constantly trying to update it and keep it up to date. And we'll talk about more of that in some of our next stories. Almost done here. I only a couple slides left. I just want to say we're not just databases, as I've already said. We're app servers, web speed, PAS-OE, CPU, disk space, and disk speed. We monitor OpenEdge replication, so you can keep your system up and running. We also monitor ProtoSQL and ProtoOracle for BI reporting. But not only we're not just monitoring, we can also help you with day-to-day things, right? We can install OpenEdge replication. We can install and configure OpenEdge Pro 2, and we can also manage it. We can install TDE, transparent data encryption, to encrypt fields in your database. We can help you configure that. As I mentioned, we already do CDC. Some of the other things we can do, we can reorganize your data for best performance, right? That's a dump and load. But a dump and load can take a long time, so we may have to talk to you about a Pro 2 Pro if you have a very large database, and we'll talk about that more at the end. We can do updates, upgrades, platform migrations. We can help write scripts for you. We can tell you if we help you with OpenEdge replication, we'll give you a whole playlist on how to handle it and what to do with it in case there's an issue. So just about anything with your database and your application that we can help you with. And if there's something we can't help you with, then the other half of the consulting group can help you with that, the application consulting group. All right. So thank you for staying here for the commercial break. Let's get on with the stories of the problems we've had. We're still in performance. This was another customer that came to us, again, 11.7 on Linux, about a 650 gigabyte database. And recently they were having poor performance. They were constantly making changes in their code, and they figured it was something like that, but they didn't know where to look. They pushed a bunch of code out and they didn't know where to look. So they hired us. We again installed the Pro Monitor, and we got a few days worth of baseline, and then we started to talk to them about what we were seeing. And we found a table with a huge query activity, and it didn't make sense that this table would suddenly have a lot of query activity. Working with a customer, we found out, yep, there was a code that was sent out on that recently, and they found out they were searching without an index on that table. So after working with them, they made some code changes, and the performance went back to normal. So they were very happy with that. They didn't know where to look. They put a lot of code out, so it would have taken them a long time to find it. As part of the service, we continued to monitor them for several more days. In fact, I think we went a couple of months. They made other code changes and things stayed good. That was the end of our service, so we removed ProMonitor and we went away. But the customer came back to us and actually has signed up for MDBA since. So the last two performance issues, the MDBA team has shown we're pretty good at these, and we can help you keep your database and your application running well. So, and again, this is just another screenshot from our dashboard. Table names have been removed to protect the innocent, but it shows you, what's happening on any given day for reads and creates. You can get the tabular data also, but this is the table that showed us a surprising table that was using a lot of reads. Okay, the first two weren't MDBA customers, although they became them. This was an unusual one because of how it was set up. This was and still is an MDBA customer. Again, on 11.7, most of our customers are on 11.7 at this point. Many are moving to 12.8. Some haven't gotten there yet. But 11.7 on Linux, a 2 terabyte database, and they were still using Classic App Server at this time. And what they were getting was intermittent slowness, right? A bunch of things would run fast, something would run slow, and all the things would run fast again, and something would run slow. So they gave us a call, and the first thing we did was, hey, what does our monitoring show? Well, it didn't show anything. It showed everything was up and running. It showed everything was responding. There didn't seem to be any performance issues. So we decided we'd join a conference call with them, see if we can figure out what's going on. Customer demonstrated the issue. And what they were doing was they have a client that runs through the classic, using the Classic App Server, builds a menu and does a bunch of queries, and they're making a lot of calls to app servers. And as they go through the queries, you would see something just hang. And it would just hang for a little while, and then it would refresh, and then it would move on. So in talking with them, we're like, okay, let's test your app servers. And they went, oh, what we have is we have 5 app servers, right? They were using the name server as a load balancer with 5 different app servers going to the database. So a name server would get a request or several requests, and it would just round robin them to the app servers, because that's how that works. Knowing this, we stopped looking at the app servers, and we wanted to find out what the name server saw. And what we did was we ran the nsman command, right? That's a name server management, to see what we could get for information on those 5 app servers. I don't know how many of you people have seen the output from a name server command, but it says, hey, I'm checking with it. Oh, my name server is up and running up here at the top. And then it gives you a list of all the app servers that it's using as its pool for load balancing. What we did notice and started asking questions about was that one of the app servers had a different IP address. Now I marked it here in yellow, so of course it jumped right out at you, but it took us a few minutes to take a look at that and see what was happening. We had to talk to several people in the networking team. Come to find out, they made some networking changes, and this is not the right IP address. So obviously what was happening, you'd make several requests, you'd log in, you'd ask for a query page, things would be fine, until the name server said, hey, go get me enterprise, and it would just hang because it couldn't connect to enterprise using that IP address, and then it would try another one, and they would get their answer. So the fix here, nothing to do with us, but they had to go fix that wrong IP address. And what they did was they just brought that machine down because, name server will notice that it was removed, and the other 4 app servers could handle the work until it was back up. They reset the network and brought it back up, and everything's fine. So again, a different one I hadn't seen before, an issue we hadn't bumped into before. So very interesting. I don't know how many people are doing this, but this was an interesting discussion on performance. All right, so let's talk a little bit about real PASOE stories. Customers are finally moving to 12. They can't use the Classic App Server on WebSpeed anymore. And moving to PASOE has been some of their biggest issues. Not because moving the application isn't hard. You can move the application and have it running up right away, but because PASOE is different from the Classic App Server, people have had issues. So let's see which ones we have here, shall we? So the first one, and this is something I've been using for a long time because people were just treating the PASOE like the Classic App Server. It's not the same thing, right? It does the same work, but it does different things. And even though the last one's called Why So Many Clients, it again goes back to that the Classic App Server works differently than PASOE. So let's get started. PASOE is not the Classic App Server. In this case, we had an MDBA customer, right? And most of our interactions are with MDBA customers because we work with them all the time. They were still on OpenEdge 11.7, but they wanted to move to PASOE on Linux before they moved to 12.8. And once they moved to PASOE, they noticed very, very bad performance on PASOE, right? So being the MDBA team, we looked at our monitoring, everything looked good. The tuning looked good to us. So what we did was we reached out to our application consulting team, right, and got them involved because from our point of view, everything looked good. The application consulting team found two major issues. And I think this is probably the first customer where they found these issues. So they've been sharing this with everybody since they move on. PASOE classes and that type of thing always say, hey, this is something you want to look at. So let's talk about the two issues. The first one is that their code was shelling out to the operating system on almost every call. They were using OS command, they were using input through, input out, they were using Linux. So they were constantly making calls to the operating system. Not a problem in the classic app server because each request was its own process on the system. In this case, PASOE has a multi-threaded process with different threads handling each request. And because of that, all of these calls to the operating system had to be handled by the operating system, and that caused contention. So if you're doing a lot of this and you're thinking of moving to PASOE, you might want to look at this before you go. So there's two fixes to this. What they decided to do was go ahead and change the code. You can do things other than call the operating system. There's lots of ABO code pieces that you can put into place. They did that, and their problem went away for this part of the performance issue. Some customers don't have too much work to do, or they need to be on 12 right now for some reason. So what we recommend to them, and that's the bottom section here, if you have too many code issues or you can't change it right away, go to more MS agents with less ABL sessions. So rather than having 25 ABL sessions contending for those system calls, drop it to 5. And that way there won't be as much contention. You'll have more agents with less ABL sessions, and your performance should increase. I've seen both of these things work until that they can finish the code changes. So that is something you can do if you think you might run into this for moving from Classic to PAS. The other issue they were having was they had many requests going to a small table. It was a table that doesn't change, and all the requests were stacking up. Not a problem in the classic app server, but PASOE is so fast in shared memory that it was causing these interactions to happen inside the database. So what we did was they said, hey, this is mostly static. We can update it every now and then. So they moved all this interaction to each ABL sessions temp table. So they didn't have to go hit the access all the time. And again, performance improved for them. So we'll just recap a little bit. They have moved up to 12.8 now. They have a very busy application. They're very happy with PASOE now. That was an interesting one, which although it didn't include the MDBA team, we were part of it, but the fixes came in from our consulting team. All right, another MDBA customer moving to PASOE. They did it slightly differently. Rather than moving the classic app server to PASOE on their own, right? They engaged professional services up front and made sure all their code was looking well, and took care of these common issues with PASOE. They moved to 12.8, and things were running great. They were up for a couple of months, didn't seem to be having a problem, and then suddenly PASOE just stopped responding. Customers are saying, hey, I can't get to the application. So they restarted PASOE once, and when it's happened more than once, they gave us a call. So we looked, right? First thing we did was looked at our monitoring and said, hey, monitoring looks good. PASOE is running. There are ABL sessions available. There are agents available. So what's going on? So we dug a little deeper, and we found Java out of memory messages in the Tomcat log, right? PASOE runs the front end, Tomcat, as an application, and the back end as a multi-session agent. So the Tomcat was running out of memory, which means it couldn't handle responses. All right, so we went and checked again on the dashboard, and we found out there were 60,000 clients connected. Now, this customer doesn't have 60,000 clients connected at any given time. This automatically set off warning bells because we know there's a known issue with application code, that they're not old application code. Again, we'll stop here for a second. Not your classic app server, right? Old application code ran on TCP. And if you didn't clean up your Java and .NET connections, TCP would clean it up when it's always connected. However, PASOE is running on Tomcat, HTTP or HTTPS, and it saves those connections just in case you want to come back. So this is what was happening with them. They weren't cleaning up the code, and these clients would just keep building up and building up and building up. So what we showed the customer is how you can monitor for the growth, right? And for a while, they were restarting the PASOE before it stalled out, right? So before it got to the point where they were running out of space on Tomcat, they would just watch it, and when it got to a certain point, they'd restart it. While they were doing that, they were testing the code change. Hey, make sure it works. They noticed as they rolled it out, the number of clients did not grow so much, and eventually they got all the code fixed, and now they're not having that problem anymore. But it did show a problem in our tool, right? We were seeing that the growth was there, but we didn't send an alert. So what we've done since this customer, we've added into our Pro Monitor, is we've added alerts for high client and high ABL sessions, right? So if you get to 10,000 clients in PASOE and that's unusual for you, we'll send you an alert. I'll let you know what's going on before it happens, so you're not waiting for it to crash. Same with the ABL sessions. If you usually run with 25 or 30 and you're starting to get up into the 50 range, something has changed and we need to go look at it. So another thing that, and this is the first customer that found it, and we've had several other customers at MDBA hit the same issue. Much quicker to find now with the alerting and much quicker to get them up and running. Again, let me show you what it looks like on the dashboard. This dashboard shows the clients, which is the front end clients. And down here at the very end is the date that they had the problem, right? Concurrent clients was 60,000, over 60,000. But just to give you more information, they had been up to 160 concurrent clients at one point, as high as 170, kept running. But again, it had to do with how many of the calls had memory in them. So this was the date that it happened. I'm actually surprised we continue running with those many clients, stale clients hanging around. But this was the view that gave us the idea of what was happening. All right, so those are the PASOE things. Again, PASOE can be a little scary moving from 11 to 12, but it is possible, and you can get very good performance, and most people are very happy once they get onto 12.8 and PASOE. Now, real migration stories. This is a little different. I'm not going to talk about any specific customers. I'm going to talk about how we help people convert their databases in a general sense, so you can understand some of the things the MDBA team is doing, and we have several of these running right now at any given time. So what I'm going to talk to you is about Pro-to-Pro and Pro-to-Pro to Pro-to-SQL. People with large databases moving off of AIX and moving to Linux, they just don't have the downtime they can have to do a dump and load, right? You can't move from AIX to Linux or Solaris to Linux or HP to Linux by just copying the database over. You have to dump and load the data. Several ways to dump and load. You can do an ASCII dump and load. You can do a binary dump and load and rebuild the indexes, which is by far the fastest. Or you can use Pro-to-Pro. Now, Pro-to-Pro is an application that we have, the MDBA team has. And what we do is we set up Pro-to-Pro, which is let's move data from progress to progress on your system. And with a couple of downtimes, one at the beginning, one at the end, you have very little downtime, and we stream the data over and keep it in sync for the period, usually a month or a couple of months, depending on the size of the database. Not fast. It doesn't do it fast, but it does it with very little downtime. And Pro-to-Pro to Pro-to-SQL is slightly different. We'll talk about that when we get to it. All right, so you're on AIX, and you need to move to Linux, right? You need to move off of 11.7 AIX, and you need to move to 12.8 on Linux, because you need to be on the most recent bug fixes and security fixes for your system. What we would do is we would set up Pro-to-Pro, usually on a Windows server. That helps us configure and set everything up. And what the Pro-to-Pro server will do is it'll keep everything in sync. So any changes that happen on AIX, the Pro-to-Pro server will move, and it will move it to the new source server. While we're doing that, we're also streaming data via code, right, from AIX to Linux. So anything that moves from AIX to Linux is just moved over, and the Pro-to-Pro server in the middle keeps it on track. So we need a few minutes, well, a couple hours maybe, on AIX to set up the Pro-to-Pro, the CDC, or the triggers that will help keep everything in sync. And then we run this, and we just keep running it till we're done. Everything's streamed over from AIX to Linux. Everything's kept in sync. And then finally, once everything is on Linux and the Pro-to-Pro server is just keeping everything in sync, we can pick a weekend to do the cutover to Linux. Okay, it can keep running for as long as you want. We have one customer who's been dawdling, has been a year and a half. Their data has been already moved over, and now they're just syncing data. When they're ready, they're going to go ahead and move over to the Linux box. And again, there'll need to be some downtime, but not days, 4 hours to 8 hours to get everything set up on the new Linux box, make sure everything is right. Okay, so again, multi-terabyte database, terabyte plus database, and you can't be down for several days to do it. This is the way to do it. Our next problem is adding ProtoSQL. And you would think, well, that's not a big deal. We just once you move it over to Linux, you receive the SQL server. But a 1 or 2 terabyte database can take 5 to 6 days maybe to dump and load and rebuild onto a Linux box. But it can take a couple weeks or longer to then take that data from Linux and move it into a SQL server. So you're doing a dump and load first to the Linux box, and you're doing a load of the SQL server. And depending on the size, it can take much longer. And many of our customers rely on the SQL Server data, right? Their application runs on the OpenEdge database, but they use the SQL Server for business intelligence, for writing invoices, for running a website, all of those things. So the data in the SQL Server database has become just as important as the Linux. So some people wouldn't move, even though we could do the Proto to them, because they would be down for several weeks with the SQL Server, and they need that to run their business. So what we do there, and again, this is the current one, right? AIX running data through the SQL Server to build a SQL database, and they're using it. First thing we do is we again set up the Proto just like we already did. Once that's up and running, we also set up the SQL Server. So now we're not just seeding the Linux box, but at the same time, we're seeding the SQL Server. And the SQL Server may lag behind because it just takes us longer to change that data and push it into a SQL Server than it does in a Proto. But again, the same situation happens, right? At the very end, once all the data's been pushed over, then the first Proto server is just keeping everything in sync. And the second ProtoSQL server is again keeping everything in the SQL Server, and we can pick a weekend to move over. So a couple hours of downtime at the beginning, a day or less for the final cutover, and you've got all your data on your new system and you're ready to go. Again, we're running a lot of these right now because people need to move to 12.8, and there's still people out there on AIX, HPUX. I think we even still have somebody on Solaris. So if you need to get your database moved off of that platform, or even if you just need to do a dump and load on it, but you can have that type of downtime, this is what we have to do that with. All right. So plenty of time for questions. As a quick summary, we talked about performance, we talked about PASOE, we talked about migration. There are so many more things the MDBA team does, but I wanted to give you a little peek into some of the more interesting situations we've had lately and the things we've worked on. Again, the MDBA team can handle nearly all your database modes, and then we can probably handle more of the things you don't think are related to your database that we can handle. So I hope you enjoyed our little storytelling today. And I think we have questions. Susan, do we have any questions?
We do. Roy and Rob, would you mind joining me on camera? Well, I am not going to be on camera, but you guys will.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. So we had a couple questions that came in, and I appreciate the storytelling. It tells a great story. But I do have one question for you about AI. Is MDBA starting to look at or use AI tools or AI?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, you're probably hearing it through all the different things now about our AI. The MDBA team jumped on the AI right away once we had the MCP connector, and we're um, we're starting to use it. We're starting to use it for the monthly reports, maybe get better things on that. We're also starting to use it when we're working with customers. So yes, we're definitely getting deep into the AI, and we're hoping to make it available. We're using it right away, but we're hoping to make it available maybe to you, so you can look at some of your data. So, well on the way, and we'll keep you guys appraised of how we're doing.
Great. There was a question on Pro Monitor. Where can we get it and how can we download it?
So, Rob, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, ProMonitor isn't a product that we offer. The only way you can get it is by becoming a managed database customer.
Right, and talk to us about that. It's probably not as expensive as you think, and you will get 20 DBAs and full-time monitoring and help if you need it in a critical situation. So.
Okay, there was a question on one of the examples you gave, Roy. It was on the wrong index usage. Could the wrong index usage have been discovered earlier? And if so, what tools would you suggest?
So the one that comes to my mind is xref, right? You can run the code with the xref command, and it will show you all of all of the indexes that are being used by code, and possibly they could have found it with that. Um, I just know that they were supposedly doing that, but they were still having trouble finding the area that was causing them a problem. So that's the way I know. I know there's other ways. Um, Code compile and code references of indexes is not my area of expertise. That again would be the application consulting team. Um, but in this case, we were able to help them because we could see that one table was getting hit too much.
Okay. Um, for those that are asking her on the webinar, I have a couple more questions that have come in, but I want to take a pause. We will be sending out a recording of this within 24 to 48 hours after the event, so you will get a copy as long as you are registered. Okay, back to questions because I forgot to say that at the beginning. Do you have any documentation to help me with my upgrade to 12?
Yes, there is documentation available. Um, I can get you the link. We're going to be sending all this stuff out, all the questions out to everybody afterwards, right, Susan?
Yes, so I can
So
include that in the.
I'll include the link.
Great.
There's also a webinar we've been doing lately, how to migrate from 11 to 12. It's a 3-hour webinar online, and we will actually walk you through converting a database from 11 to 12, setting up your code so that you can start looking for error messages when you move from 11 to 12. And the last thing would be actually migrating this application from Classic App Server to PASOE and going through some of the gotchas there. So if you're interested, let Susan know, and we'll see if there's enough interest to get someone else another online webinar set. So.
All right, here's another question for you. Are there other methods to recompile indexes other than dump and load or dump and reload?
Rob, is that
Yeah.
one you want to
So
take? Yeah.
yeah, you can rebuild indexes. It's an offline activity, but that would be part of what you would do as a dump with a dump and load anyway. But yes, you can just rebuild indexes without doing a dump and load. You could also do index compaction, which will increase the utilization of the indexes, reduce how much empty space there is in the blocks. So that's another thing you can do.
Okay. Anything to add, Roy, before I move on to the next one? You look like you were going to
I,
say something, so
I trust
okay.
Rob much better than me on this one.
Okay. All right. Is there a way to find the code that's affecting the performance of PASOE? Or is there a tool that can analyze the output of 4GL trace to find the slow code?
So yes, on PASOE, we know that when people move from Classic App Server to PASOE, um, it sort of stressed the code in ways it didn't show up in the Classic App Server or web speed. So what we've added is a performance server-side performance tool that you can turn on and gather information, and it will give you information stacks that are available on that code. We've also recently added leak. That's the word I'm looking for, leak, right? So memory leaks. Some of those tools are available now for PASOE too. I'll try to add that. Some links, web links for those things. But yes, I would definitely suggest that uh, evaluating your code using the performance tools that are now available, and um, the memory leak tools are available now. Some you can do online, some you can run, and also there's our application development team. They've helped several people get over the hump, moving from Classic to PASOE, and they use all the same tools. So I just want to make sure you know they're there. So.
Okay, great. I think we might have time for one more. I see one more question is about costs and how much does the MDBA service cost?
Okay, well, I sort of alluded to that, right?
You did.
But it's based on every customer is different. Um, but I think you'll find us very competitive with certain other companies that are out there just selling monitoring. We're available. And if you're looking at cost, I'd be glad to give you an estimate. It's based on a number of users or the size of your database or how many sites you have. We have customers with 500 sites. We charge them more than the one customer who just has a couple of databases and a couple hundred people in there. And it's far less, a fraction of the cost of a full-time DBA. So if you're looking for help for your group, you'll be able to get help for much less than the cost of a full-time DBA.
Okay, I don't see any other questions that come in or have come in. So I think we can wrap up for today. But for Roy and Rob, thank you for joining us today. And from all of us at Progress to all of you, have a great day.
Thank you for joining. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.